Hall & Wilcox acknowledges the traditional custodians of the lands on which this podcast is recorded. We pay our respects to their elders, past and present, and to all First Nations people joining us today.
Hello and welcome back to our latest and last Private Clients podcast in our Business Succession series, where we are talking about business succession planning and the issues that commonly arise for business owners looking to transition family businesses, whether planned or unplanned. My name is Erin Brown and I'm a member of the Newcastle Private Clients team at Hall & Wilcox. I'm delighted to be your host for this episode. Last week, we discussed the complexities surrounding directly held businesses, including the benefits of having a well-drafted shareholders agreement or buy-sell deed in place. On this week's episode, we discuss the role of the family office and the increasing trend of implementing family agreements to ensure the smooth transition of control of family trusts and companies. I am joined today by my colleague, Emma Woolley from our Melbourne office. Emma heads up our national family advisory practice and has significant experience in the family office space, including holding a number of advisory roles for privately held family businesses. Emma, family office seems to be a growing buzzword in the succession planning space. What is a family office and what are the trends you are seeing in this space at the moment?
Thanks, Erin. Hi, and it's great to be with you. You're quite right that family office is a buzzword, and there's a common perception that there's like a single definition of what a family office is. But I think I've heard a lot of people say, if you've seen one family office, you've seen one family office. The reality is that they're all different. The structure, makeup and purpose can really vary depending on the family and what their needs are. But generally, and most often, we're looking at a family office being a private company or other entity that manages the finances and personal affairs for a family, often for multiple generations. So effectively, the family office is utilised to enable the family to pool their assets and centralise resources. It might offer services like investment management, tax management, philanthropy services, and even day-to-day financial administration like paying for people's insurances. So those sorts of personal concierge-like services are also quite common. Now, these services might be serviced internally, so they might actually employ people to deliver that type of requirements, or outsourced with the family office actually managing the delivery of the services from third-party inputs. The intention is ultimately to preserve and grow family wealth. And a family office-like structure can really help in that regard because it provides a professional, centralised way for families, high net worth families and individuals to manage their complex and lifestyle needs. It's obviously really important that appropriate mechanisms exist to ensure that the office is managed effectively and that the wealth will transfer and transition across those generations successfully and smoothly. Now, Erin, statistics and research show that families who have good governance and good communication are much more likely to thrive and be successful in getting the wealth across the generations than those who don't have that sort of good governance and communication. So this means that there should be a focus on communication and building trusting relationships. So it makes sense, obviously, where you've got a family that are used to having good governance mechanisms and good communications are much more likely to be able to do that as part of a transition process. Also, I think equipping younger family members with the tools and experience they need to manage wealth in the future and manage the family office, and also it's an opportunity for the family to come together and have a solid agreement about what is this wealth for, what is the purpose of the wealth and what are they trying to achieve together. And it's a really great way to facilitate all of these things. I think, Erin, you mentioned maybe we should have a think about or talk about recent trends in the family office space.
Yes, Emma. I'd be really interested in hearing from your experience what the recent trends in the family office space have been. I know from my perspective, we've been seeing a much greater emphasis on clients and a willingness to put forward a family office, whether that's a formalised structure through a private company or whether that's much more informalised with a simple family board with some external advisors. What have you been seeing in this space recently?
I think that's right, Erin. It goes back to that first point that I made, that not all of them are the same, and sometimes it's as simple as having a mechanism to come together in a semi-formal governance way where the family will come together to review and assess the performance of those that they're engaging outside of the family to work with them. I think from a trend point of view, we're definitely seeing family offices becoming more interested in bypassing, say, traditional fund managers, private capital, co-investing directly in property developments, and certainly a much greater interest in technology from a startup point of view, but also with established tech businesses. And that's not just exclusive to family offices at the moment, but also in the context of future planning and sustainability, an interest in renewables, a very strong emphasis on looking at ESG, sustainability and impact in the family investments, and certainly professionalism is definitely something that I've seen a lot more of in the last decade, building up in the last decade. Many offices are now hiring former investment bankers, lawyers, tech executives, and so bringing that strong experience and institutional rigor into what were once quite family-run affairs. So the shift is driven, I think, maybe by the complexity of today's markets and also the need really to therefore have that kind of specialised expertise and experience. So outside of the focus on the investment aspect of things, there's definitely been a strong drive towards succession planning and family dynamics and making sure that younger generations who are asserting influence over the family and coming to the fore just with that generational change, there's much greater emphasis now, as I said, driven by that younger generation to consider family governance, to make sure that the family are aligned from an investment perspective and have shared values. And so documenting that shared value and purpose in the form of family constitutions, having next generation involved in leadership is now becoming almost standard practice, I think, Erin.
Yeah, look, I think succession planning for family offices really does extend far beyond a simple transfer of wealth, and we really need to be looking at preparing successors and establishing strong governance to avoid conflict and really to ensure long-term continuity of the family business. So rather than being set and forget, succession planning really needs to evolve over many years, and the process really needs to begin years before the transition is actually expected to take place. So while the next generation are often involved in the family business in some capacity, I think it's really essential that families are identifying potential successors, and that should be based on skills, experience, and also alignment with family values. What are you seeing in terms of the role, Emma, of training and developing the next generation?
And I'd agree. It's really important. As I said before, there is an increasing emphasis on the need for preparation and education for the next generation of families. It's really important that they're ready, and families are doing this in really different ways. Some are accessing existing training programs that might be offered by other institutions, financial or otherwise, making sure that families are prepared to take formal leading roles within businesses. So that might be making sure that they understand the roles, duties and responsibilities of a director, for example. So maybe taking up the AICD course as an example. But mentorship and education training are really good because they provide people with the foundation and the building blocks to understand those roles and responsibilities and developing skills. But there isn't any real substitute for exposure and actual practical experience. So I think families that are doing this well are introducing the next generation early and having them understand and have visibility and be involved in board meetings, operational responsibilities, and also in some cases philanthropic initiatives to help build their confidence and their capability for the future.
Thanks, Emma. Look, it's obviously really important that formal succession planning structures to manage all of the complexities and around family businesses and to mitigate future conflicts are put in place. Where possible, we recommend family agreements be considered as an essential succession planning tool, and that these agreements be executed by all family members. A family agreement serves as a roadmap for the smooth transition of business ownership and management to the next generation, and a well-drafted agreement should include provisions that document not only the ownership and management succession, but also the ongoing distribution of profits and potential exit of family members that may not wish to be involved with the family business going forward. A critical component of a family agreement is to clarify the ongoing role and expectation of each family member, and often distinguishes between the family members working in the business and those who take a more passive and investment role. It's really common for a family board to be established consisting of both family members and independent board members, whose key role is to oversee the long-term strategic direction of the family's wealth and business interests. Emma, how important do you consider the role of the family board, and what are you seeing in developing family boards and who sits on those boards?
I think, like any sort of business, a business which has got good governance in place is much more likely to do better at transition and succession. And I think there's plenty of research that shows that if you're managing a shared enterprise, you're going to be better at it and more receptive to forward planning if you have existing solid governance. If families have boards that work well with formal meetings and good communications, they're going to be much better placed to keep each other accountable and therefore build trust, which I think is an absolute essential component for a really good succession plan. From a family board perspective, in my experience, there seems to be an increased acceptance of the need for external input in family boards. So having independent family members is something that in the past people might have been resistant to in the family context because they didn't want necessarily outsiders involved. And the reality is that's changing and moving and has been for quite a while. I think reality is that it's really important to make sure that you identify the right person to join the board. The person, if we're intending them to be independent, they really need to be truly independent. So if they are aligned to, say, a particular generation, and they might then have, perhaps inadvertently, but they will have biases towards that generation that they're aligned with. So I think picking the person is really important. They need to have a truly independent perspective, otherwise they won't necessarily be respected as so by the family. And they need to be really clear about what their purpose is in joining the board. So why are they there? Are they there to provide support and guidance? Are they there to help manage potential contention? What is the reason why they're there? And I think it's really important to always have the right people involved in decision making. And the good thing about independence is that the reality is blood might not be thicker than water, but that doesn't mean the family members won't occasionally disagree. And I think having somebody who has got no effective skin in the game from a family point of view can be really useful in managing contention. And also, I think, Erin, from that blood thicker than water aspect of things, the independent family board member won't be offended if their absolute best quality and the most important aspect of their independence is the fact that they're not a member of the family.
Are you seeing from a family board perspective, are the independents commonly advisors to the business, so lawyers, accountants, financial planners? Are they people who are actually involved within the actual operational context of the business as well, CFOs, CEOs? What are you seeing there as a trend, or is it a bit of a mix?
It's really a bit of a mix. I think it goes back to that point about what is the purpose, what are they trying to achieve by having that independent perspective. So if you're looking at the skills of those around the table from the family point of view, just like any other board, you look for gaps and determine where it is that you might need that additional perspective or support. So if the family is very focused on a particular area from an investment perspective, they might draw upon people who have got strong experience in that area, and that might be a lawyer or a person with other background in finance or otherwise. If you're looking for someone to assist in other aspects of the family life, or you're looking for someone going back to that idea that contention might arise, I think, Erin, one of the things I find quite surprising is that there's very many families who do put in place solid plans about how to manage succession, but not that many of them contemplate the idea that everybody might not always get on. And so of the very few families, and from a percentage perspective in the research year upon year, it's only about a third of families that actually have any sort of plan. And of that third, only about 10% have any plan that involves how do we manage circumstances where we can't all agree. So having someone entirely independent, and going back to that comment about blood being thicker than water, their value comes simply from them not being part of the family and being able to manage that without the emotion, manage decision making without the emotion that comes from being related to each other. So I think they can have real value in that area as well. So it might be a professional qualification, but equally it might be someone who's well suited to help the family manage contention. And there's nothing wrong with anticipating that, because that's a reality. People are people, they don't always see eye to eye, and that can be a really good thing from a challenge perspective. You don't want groupthink. So certainly independence can add value in lots of different ways.
I think that's a really important consideration, Emma, and something that we often see is how do we break those deadlocks, or how do we assist family members to reach a decision when, you often have family members who are coming from very different perspectives. You've got family members who are simply interested in profit share. They may not actually be involved in the business, but they may be a passive income earner, particularly once mum and dad have passed. And then you've got family members who are obviously driving the business and driving the success of the business, who have very different goals and potentially different visions for how profits are to be invested as opposed to distributed out of the company or the family trust. I think it's really important when we've got family agreements that we're not only putting in robust dispute resolution procedures, but that families are not only looking at how they transfer the business and who's going to control it, but actually turning their minds to how profits are going to be distributed. Is there going to be a mandatory percentage that needs to be distributed each year to ensure that all family members are looked after? Are we actually going to set out parameters for reinvestment into the business and how decisions regarding distributions are going to be made? The other thing I'm seeing a lot, and we're preparing with the family agreements we've been drafting, is looking at how family members are employed in the business and looking at how they can maintain a role within the business going forward. And I'd really be interested in your thoughts about that, because often there's an expectation that family members simply can take a role in the business. I think it's really important when you're looking at employing family members in the business that they've actually got the skills and expertise they need to actually perform the functions. I think by making sure that there's appropriate provisions in place around that, you actually can avoid lengthy disputes going forward, where you don't want a situation where one child's running the business, someone else is employed but not actually doing their share, and it can be really complicated. So what are your thoughts on that, and how much are you seeing this actually make its way into a documented agreement?
I think all of the things that you mentioned there, the different attitudes to risk, clarity around distributions, policies and considerations around who can be engaged in the business and on what basis, all of those things are potential areas of heat. And the agreements that we're doing and preparing all need to take these different aspects into account. And the great benefit of going through this process is actually having a conversation with families about these different issues, because there might be concerns that have been suppressed or held back, and this is an opportunity to ensure that they see the light and everybody gets to air their perspective on that. So the process towards the actual document is the really important bit, the opportunity for the family to express their separate views and then to come together and try and find common ground and put that in place. So it's always much easier to manage a difficult issue if you have a structure which is in place to assist you in how you're going to go about that. It's obviously much, much easier to determine what that process should be in circumstances where you're currently not fighting. Trying to put in place mechanisms to manage decision making when you're in the middle of a battle is very difficult. So the process and ultimately the policy and the document that is put in place are both equally as important to manage these issues. But definitely we have families where they have strict policies that nobody can be employed unless they're employed on effectively an arm's length basis with a position description and market remuneration and benefits. And some families have direct prohibitions of people who are not bloodline family members, so say in-laws, being able to work in a business. So everybody has a different perspective on that, and that's absolutely fine. The key is to air the different family members' different perspectives and make sure we try and get to a consensus and then document how that's going to be managed. And going back to it again, same thing again, have provision to manage contention where this arises.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Emma. One of the things I often find is that clients are sometimes reluctant to put these agreements in place while they're still alive, and to actually, particularly where they've got children that are working in the business and children who aren't, and obviously the issues are quite difficult. My experience is that if families have gotten together, they've documented agreement, they're much more willing to go with what's been agreed, even if it's not something that they necessarily would have put forward themselves. But the fact that it's been planned, it's been discussed, and they've had a chance to air their thoughts and their views, generally speaking, people then move forward on that basis of what they have actually agreed. Now, just before we finish up, one of the things I'm also seeing when I've been drafting these family agreements and discussions with clients is that there's a really big focus at the moment on philanthropy in Australia, and to the point where we're seeing quite a lot of clients who are actually looking at putting philanthropic provisions in these agreements and actually having those discussions with the next generation about how they can use the family wealth for purpose. What's your experience been with philanthropy, and are you seeing it as something that's a focus of really the next generation?
Yes, Erin, I think families and family offices alike can be a central hub for the family in determining their policy or their vision around giving and managing the complexities that there might be in giving, and ensuring obviously that the philanthropic efforts are effective, in line with what the family's expectations are, impactful, sustainable, and integrated with the overall planning. I think that's a really great way of managing that. And there's definitely very many families that we're working with who see giving as a very strong and important aspect of their planning and the important aspect of what the family office is designed to do. It certainly varies, and I think you're right to say that there is a perception that it is next generations who are heavily focused on this aspect. I don't necessarily think that is the case. My probably anecdotal experience is it's much more driven by the incumbent generations or the founder generations. They may have more time and more willingness to consider that at that stage and age of life. But certainly families who come together and have family offices, I'm definitely seeing that most of them will have some sort of policy or planning around how they're going to give and how they're going to give collectively as a family.
Thanks everyone for listening today. That brings our business succession series to a close. As always, please feel free to reach out to myself, Emma, or any of our Hall & Wilcox private clients team if you have any questions or would like to discuss your own business succession arrangements. You can find our details on our website, which is hallandwilcox.com.au, or connect with us on LinkedIn. Otherwise, we look forward to welcoming you for our next series on incapacity in the new year.
This podcast is not legal advice and should not be relied upon as such. You should always obtain legal advice about your specific circumstances.